Okay, I want you to picture something for me. You're walking down the street. You see a tree, a car, a person walking a dog. You think you're just a camera, right? You're just, recording what's already there. But what if that is completely fundamentally wrong? What if your mind isn't just observing the world, but is actually, well, building it? Or even reconfiguring it in real time?
I mean, that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie. Or maybe something you'd hear in a late-night philosophy class. But this is actually the premise of the deep dive we're looking at today.
It really is. We are unpacking this huge feature from Popular Mechanics. And I have to be honest, when I saw the source, I did a double take. Popular Mechanics.
Right.
Usually they're telling me how to soundproof my garage or explaining the thrust-to-weight ratio of a new jet. I don't usually go there for an existential crisis about my own soul.
Yeah, it's a bit of a departure for them. For, over a century, they've been all about the how-to of machines. But here they've turned that engineering lens inward, toward the most complex machine we know, human consciousness.
And the mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We aren't just doing the whoa dude dorm room thing. We're trying to move the question, what is consciousness, out of the beanbag chair and, into the lab. We've got evolutionary biologists, we have quantum physicists, psychedelic researchers, all circling this one idea. That consciousness might be way, way stranger than we ever thought.
It's a huge shift in the scientific consensus. For so long, the standard view was just that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, like exhaust from an engine.
Right.
But these sources are arguing something totally different, that it might exist outside the brain, that it could persist after death, and this is the part that really got me. It might even access dimensions that we can't perceive.
Hidden dimensions. See, that's where I usually start to get a little skeptical. It sounds loose, but we'll get there. We have a lot to get through. So let's start at the bottom. The absolute basement of biology, the cell.
A great place to start. Specifically, the 37 trillion of them that make up you.
37 trillion. I can't even picture that number. It's just noise in my head.
It's massive. And, think back to high school biology. We're taught that these cells are basically biological robots. They get a job, they follow their DNA instructions, and then they die. They're just bricks in the wall.
Exactly. My liver cells filter toxins. My skin cells protect me. They don't have opinions. They don't have dreams. They're just functioning.
That's the standard view. But William B. Miller, a physician and evolutionary biologist in the source, he's challenging that entirely. He argues that cells aren't just mindless drones or passive robots. He believes they're conscious.
Conscious? Wait, like, I think, therefore I am conscious?
In a sense, yes. Miller's idea is that life and consciousness arose at the same time. You can't have one without the other. He's suggesting that each one of those 37 trillion cells has agency. They make decisions. They have preferences.
Okay, hold on. I don't love that. It gives me a bit of an identity crisis. I like to think I'm the CEO of this body. I make the calls. I decide to pick up this coffee cup. You're telling me I'm not the CEO? I'm just like, the spokesperson for a committee of 37 trillion squabbling shareholders?
That's actually a very good analogy. And yeah, it really does challenge the definition of self. If every cell has some form of consciousness, then the cell, not the organism, might be the fundamental unit of biological action. You might just be the collective hallucination of a cellular colony.
That is deeply disturbing. But is this just a theory? Because I can say my socks are conscious, but that doesn't make it true. Do we have any proof that cells can actually go off script and do their own thing?
We do. And this is where we have to talk about xenobots.
Xenobots. Sounds like a villain from a Michael Bay movie.
It does, doesn't it? But they're very real. Scientists took skin cells from frog embryos.
Just regular skin cells?
Just standard skin cells, and they separated them from the embryo. Then they just let them reorganize on their own.
Okay, so they took the bricks out of the wall and put them in a pile.
Exactly. Now, according to standard biology, those skin cells should just died. Or maybe formed a little flat layer of skin tissue. Because that's what their DNA tells them to do. Be skin.
Right. Stick together, make a shield. That's the job.
But they didn't do that. They reorganized themselves into these small spherical shapes. And then they started doing something incredible. They started moving.
Moving, like rolling around.
Not just rolling, swimming. And here is the key detail that points to agency. They use cilia to do it.
Cilia. Those are the little hair-like things, right?
Correct. Now, normally in a frog embryo, skin cells have cilia, but their job is to stay put and just wave back and forth to push mucus along the skin. They're like fans that are fixed to a ceiling.
Okay. So their job is to move the fluid, not to move themselves.
Precisely. But in these xenobots, the cells repurpose the cilia. Think of it like this. Imagine a team of rowers on a boat. Their job is to sit in the seat and pull the oar to move the water. But then the boat sinks. The rowers don't just drown. They climb out, stand up, and start using the oars as legs to walk across the land.
Wow, that's a vivid image. And kind of terrifying. So they went from being rowers to hikers without any new DNA instructions.
Zero. The DNA didn't change at all. The cells decided to change their function to survive in a new environment. They improvised.
That just completely breaks the robot theory. Robots don't improvise. If you take the wheels off a car, it doesn't decide to grow legs.
Exactly. And this leads us to what some scientists, Peter Noble and Alex Pejikoff, are calling the third state of life.
The third state. Okay, so state 1 is alive, state 2 is dead. What is state 3? Zombie mode.
Not quite. Zombie implies it's mindless. The third state is where cells reorganize themselves after an organism's death to form something totally new with new functions.
So the creature dies, the CEO is gone, but the employees basically say, hey, we're not done, and start building a new company.
That is the implication. It's really strong support for Miller's theory of cellular consciousness. If the pilot is dead, but the crew keeps working and even builds a whole new kind of vehicle, it proves the crew was never just mindlessly following the pilot's orders in the first place.
That is incredibly spooky, but I guess it makes biological sense. Life wants to live. But the source material says this goes deeper than biology. This is where it gets into the woo-woo territory for me. They start talking about physics.
Yes, the quantum connection.
See, whenever I hear quantum consciousness, my hand immediately reaches for my wallet because I feel like someone's about to sell me magic crystals. It feels like a keyword people just throw around when they don't know the answer. Why do we dream? Quantum. Ghosts. Quantum. Is there any real science here?
You're right to be skeptical, and the Popular Mechanics article acknowledges that. They even mention an anecdote where they asked a theoretical physicist, an experimental physicist, and a philosopher about this connection.
Well, let me guess. It was a cage match.
Pretty much. They couldn't agree on anything. It is highly controversial. However, and this is a big however, we aren't just dealing with theory anymore. We have a study. A study involving rats and anesthesia that makes this very, very concrete.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is the part I really want to get. How do you test for quantum consciousness in a rat?
First, we have to look at the brain's hardware. You've got your neurons, obviously. But inside the neurons, you have these microscopic, hollow tubes called microtubules.
Microtubules, okay.
So for decades, a physicist named Roger Penrose and an anesthesiologist, Stuart Hameroff, have argued that these microtubules are where the quantum magic happens. They believe these tubes are able to maintain a quantum state. Basically, they act as the antenna for consciousness.
Okay, so the theory is brain is the radio, microtubules are the antenna, and consciousness is the signal.
A simplified view, but yes. Now here's the problem. Critics always said the brain is too warm and wet for quantum states. It's messy. Quantum stuff usually needs, absolute zero in a vacuum. They said any quantum state in the brain would just fall apart instantly.
Right, it's like trying to build an ice sculpture in a sauna.
Exactly. But then came the rat study. Scientists wanted to see if anesthesia works by messing with these microtubules. Because think about it, we've been using anesthesia for over 100 years, but we still don't really know how it switches consciousness off.
That is a terrifying fact, by the way.
It is. So they took a group of rats, they gave them a gas anesthetic to knock them out, but, and this is the key part, they also gave them a drug called apothalone B.
Apothalone B, what does that do?
It's a stabilizer. It specifically binds to microtubules and reinforces them. It makes them more rigid. It keeps them from falling apart.
So they basically armored the antenna.
In a way, yes. And the result was stunning. The rats with the stabilized microtubules remained conscious for longer despite the anesthesia. And when they did finally pass out, they woke up much faster.
Wait, really? So the gas that's supposed to knock them out just didn't work as well because they reinforced these tiny little tubes?
Correct.
Okay, that changes things. Because if anesthesia works by disrupting the microtubules and reinforcing the microtubules blocks the anesthesia,
then it implies that the microtubules are the physical seat of consciousness. It suggests anesthesia works by breaking the quantum coherence in those tubes. It's one of the strongest pieces of physical evidence we have linking quantum mechanics to the actual experience of being awake.
So it's not just magic crystals. They literally found the switchboard, and they found a way to lock the switch in the RN position.
That's a fair way to put it. And if the brain is capable of these quantum operations, it opens the door to what Michael Provoca, another scientist in the source, suggests. That in moments of heightened awareness, or maybe altered states, we might be accessing hidden dimensions.
Hidden dimensions. Again, my skeptical arm's going off. But,
Yeah.
I mean, if the brain is a quantum device, I guess it's theoretically possible.
Well, in physics, extra dimensions are mathematically necessary for theories like string theory to even work. If our consciousness operates on a quantum level, it's not impossible that it could interact with those dimensions. We just usually filter it out.
Which brings us to the final piece of this puzzle. We've talked about the cells. We've talked about the quantum hardware. But the source takes a hard left turn into chemistry, specifically psychedelics.
Yes. The chemical bridge between the biological and those potential hidden dimensions.
The source mentions the Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research at Johns Hopkins. They've been studying LSD and DMT. And we are not talking about, recreational use here.
No, this is serious clinical research, and the subjective reports they get are fascinating. People don't just see colors or weird shapes. They report a connection to an ultimate reality. They report a decreased fear of death.
And didn't some of them claim to see God?
Many did. Or they encountered what they describe as entities. Now, a skeptic would just say, well, the brain is hallucinating, it's misfiring. But if we go with the microtubule theory that the brain is a quantum receiver, what if the psychedelics are just tuning the dial?
That's the thought that keeps me up at night. Are you hallucinating, or are you just finally seeing what's always there but is usually filtered out?
Precisely. And the source brings in a study from Argentina, from the Miguel Lillo Foundation, that adds an evolutionary twist to this. They suggest that these substances might have actually made us who we are.
Is this the stoned ape theory?
It's a modern, more scientific version of it, yeah. The idea is that early humans didn't just stumble on psilocybin mushrooms and have a fun afternoon. The consistent consumption of these compounds over thousands of generations might have been a driver for the explosion in human brain size and complexity.
So early humans eating mushrooms weren't just tripping, they were upgrading their hardware.
In a sense, the idea is that psychedelics force the brain to form new connections, to process information in totally new ways. It wasn't just an escape from reality, it was a tool for constructing a more complex reality.
That completely flips the script. We usually think of drugs as something that distorts our natural consciousness. But this suggests our natural consciousness might actually be the result of the drugs.
It forces you to reconsider the whole relationship between our biology and our environment. If external chemicals helped build our internal mind, the line between you and the world gets even blurrier.
When we started this, I thought, okay, cool, conscious cells. But we've gone from 37 trillion tiny conscious beings living inside us
To cells that can survive our death, reorganize, and build new life forms in this third state.
to actual quantum tunnels in our brain that act as antennas for consciousness, which we can reinforce with drugs.
And finally, to the idea that our very ability to sit here and have this conversation might be thanks to our ancestors eating mind-altering fungi.
It is. It's a lot. And frankly, it makes the whole concept of me feel very fragile. If I'm just a colony of cells running on quantum hardware that was programmed by mushrooms, who was driving the bus?
That is the ultimate question. We tend to think of ourselves as a monolith, a single soul, or a pilot. But this research suggests we're a collective. We're a messy, loud, quantum-connected parliament of parts.
And it brings us back to that final provocative thought from the popular mechanics source about death.
Yes. If consciousness isn't confined to the brain, if it exists in every single cell, and if those cells can enter a third state or access hidden dimensions via quantum mechanics, then maybe death isn't the end we think it is.
It's not an off switch.
No, it might just be a reorganization. The signal doesn't stop, the radio just breaks, and all the parts go on to build something else.
A reorganization. I don't know if that's terrifying or comforting.
That's for the listener to decide.
Fair enough. Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. I think I'm going to go stare at my hand for a while and try to communicate with my cells. Maybe apologize to them for all the coffee I drank today.
I'm sure they'll forgive you.
I hope so. Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep your minds open, and we'll catch you on the next one.